What is up, folks? How's it going? This is Watch for MW Technology. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you guys are enjoying the location. We're at a secret spot where we can film the bridge. It's obviously quite blurred out, but today we're going to be talking about our three-way comparison between the Samsung Galaxy Tab S10 Ultra versus the iPad Pro and the 11th generation Surface Pro from Microsoft. We're going to be taking a look at the core fundamental differences between all three of these tablets in terms of display size, dimensions, the overall feature sets, as well as the internal capabilities, AI features, and battery life to ultimately determine which tablet is more capable, which has the best overall value and flexibility, and which is the best to replace your laptop or desktop setup with these Ultra tablets. So let's get into it. Now first, let's get into price. Now each tablet that we have is the baseline configuration. So the iPad Pro M4 starts around $12.99 for the 13-inch version. The Samsung tablet is about $11.99 and the Surface tablet is about $10.99 for the LCD version. There's also an OLED version of the Surface Pro 11th generation for another $200 extra. Now on the iPad, if you want a Apple Pencil or Pencil Pro, it's about $80 to $130 respectively. If you want the Magic Keyboard attachment, which comes with the trackpad and keyboard, it's about $350. The Samsung actually comes with the S Pen, which is nice, but it's another $200 for the slim keyboard or $350 for the keyboard with the trackpad on the Samsung side. Now on the Microsoft side, either you can get the Surface Pro keyboard with the slim pen for around $280, or for $450 you can get the keyboard with the built-in battery, so you can use it detached from the tablet if you're going to use this as a desktop replacement setup. Obviously from a value perspective, the Surface Pro 11th generation, because it has an LCD display, you are getting it at the cheapest price point, which is a pretty good deal considering it is running a full Windows 11 operating system with a fairly powerful processor, and we'll talk about the display quality difference between LCD and OLED later on. But the first thing I want to talk about is the actual design and shape of the displays themselves. Now you can see that the iPad and the Surface Pro have a similar size, 13 inches, but they're different shape. 4:3 aspect ratio on the iPad versus 2:3 aspect ratio on the Surface. The 2:3 aspect ratio is a tiny bit wider, so you don't get as large black bars on top and bottom, and I think it's a perfect display size for a computer. Good vertical real estate with a good balance of media content watching abilities. The Samsung is definitely designed for media consumption. With its larger overall display, thinner bezels, it measures around 14.6 inches, as a 16:10 aspect ratio display, and it's fantastic to consume videos and watch general media. It's probably optimized for that function. You don't get the same kind of vertical real estate if you're going to use this in landscape position, but for media watching, it's definitely the best one. Now, from a portability standpoint, the iPad definitely has the edge up. It has the smallest footprint out of the other two tablets. It's also thinner and lighter than the other two, measuring around 5.1 millimeters in terms of thickness and only weighing about 579 grams, versus the Samsung is second place to that at around 5.4 millimeters in terms of thickness and weighing about 718 grams. And the Surface Pro 11, although it has a pretty small footprint, similar to the iPad, is a lot thicker and heavier at 9.3 millimeters in terms of thickness and just under 900 grams in terms of weight. Now beyond that, let's talk about the actual display quality. Now obviously we're using OLED panels on the Samsung and iPad respectively, but the Surface Pro also comes with an OLED, and it'll be similar price to the iPad Pro with the OLED display. But we have the LCD display, and I want to actually compare OLED versus LCD and to see whether it's actually worth the price, another $200 to get the OLED panel on the Surface side. And if you're looking at the displays from an extreme angle, either left, right, top to bottom, you're going to see a significant dip in terms of contrast ratio, colors, and brightness on the LCD panel, versus on the OLEDs, things look a lot more consistent. In terms of which panel looks the best, I definitely have to give it to the Apple XDR. It's at least twice the brightness of the Samsung and at least 4 times the brightness of the LCD panel in terms of dynamic range. Contrast, black levels are really quite exceptional on the iPad, and quite similar on the Samsung as well, but I think the Samsung really shifts the colors a little bit more to the extreme saturated side, and it's just generally a more processed looking image versus the video and overall images that you're looking at on the iPad are a little bit more realistic. And in reference mode, you can definitely color grade or do some photo editing or art creation and be a little bit more realistic in terms of its color reproduction to reality. Beyond that, when you're looking at the displays straight on, you can definitely also see a pretty big difference in terms of color reproduction on the LCD side, not only in terms of contrast ratio, black levels, but also just the overall dullness that you get with the LCD is pretty pronounced once you start looking at side by side with both the iPad and the Samsung. But in isolation, I think the Surface Pro with the LCD display looks great. You're not going to really notice too much, and if you're not a display snob, it's a very, very usable display. And I think for most people out there, they're probably going to forget that's an LCD display. And in most regards, you're not going to get a big jump up in terms of battery life or overall efficiency. But yes, if you're going to consume a lot of content, a lot of videos and things like that, there is a case for having the OLED panel. But just for general office use or work, and just as a general use computer, it's more than good enough. On top of that, the really awesome thing about the Surface tablet is that it actually has a very high resolution native display that refreshes at 120 Hz, just like the other two tablets. And in fact, it has the highest PPI count of about 267 versus on the iPad, you're looking at about 264 and 239 on the S10 Ultra. Furthermore, another great thing about the Surface tablet is that it has the most port and connectivity options built in. So you have two USB 4/Thunderbolt connections that have a data transfer rate of up to 40 gigabits a second. So you can easily use this with a USB-C hub or connect it to an external display, as well as get power up to 65 watts via the USB-C connection. And on top of that, you also have the dedicated Surface proprietary power connector, which charges up to 39 watts. So if you want to charge this thing, you don't lose a USB-C port, which is pretty great, unlike the iPad, which has a single USB 4/Thunderbolt connection, which is similar in terms of data throughput. But if you're going to be charging the iPad, you're going to lose that connection, unfortunately, unless you're using some sort of hub or something like that. The Samsung utilizes a USB-C 3.2 Gen 1 connection, which is slower in terms of data throughput, up to 5 gigabits a second, but it does also have a fingerprint scanner built in addition to having a micro SD expansion slot for extra storage. The Surface Pro also has a user accessible M.2 slot just under the kickstand, which is user accessible without any tools. You do need a Torx head to get out the actual M.2 drive, but you can easily swap in a 4 or 1 terabyte drive and save yourself some money there. And it's nice to see that Microsoft is making this a user expandable option, which is not the case on the Apple side. Now let's talk about the keyboard attachments. Now on the Apple side, I think they're using one of the best keyboard attachments ever fitted to a tablet with the Magic Keyboard. Yes, it's expensive at $350, but the trackpad is just as good as what you get on a MacBook, and the keyboard itself is also super easy and comfortable to type on with good key spacing, good amount of key travel, mechanical feedback, and it's just a great laptop replacement once you pair an iPad Pro with this Magic Keyboard. It is not powered, so you can't detach the keyboard and use it separately from the tablet, unlike what other third-party keyboard manufacturers are doing for both iPad and Android and Windows tablets as well. So for example, on the Surface Pro keyboard, they have a new Flex keyboard that has that functionality, but we have the basic keyboard for the Surface Pro, which actually comes with the second generation Slim Pen, so you have a little storage slot for that. But the keyboard itself on the Surface Pro was always excellent, and there's no exception with the latest generation. Pretty much they haven't changed the design, so you still get a glass face trackpad that has multi-touch capabilities, good amount of feedback, and very, very responsive, just like any laptop would be. And the keys themselves on the Surface Pro keyboard are very tactile, similar feeling to what you get on the Magic Keyboard. Now, unfortunately, the Samsung keyboard that we have, the Slim keyboard, is okay. I mean, it is $200 for the slim keyboard. If you want the keyboard with the trackpad, it's $350. But the keys themselves on the factory Samsung keyboard don't really feel all that great. They do definitely have kind of a cheaper plastic feeling towards them in terms of the recoil action. The layout is not too bad and the key spacing is not too bad, but you just don't get the same amount of travel between the keystrokes, and just the overall general comfort and build quality is just not up to what Microsoft and Apple is providing. Now, each tablet comes with their own respective stylus, whether it's the Apple Pencil or Pencil Pro on the iPad side, the S Pen, which comes included with the Samsung tablet, which is nice, or the Slim Pen 2nd generation on the Microsoft side. You can take physical notes, transcribe, take screenshots, as well as do some enhancements with AI embedded features that each tablet comes with on all of these platforms fairly easily and intuitively, and I don't think one stylus has any inherent advantages or disadvantage. I would only say that if you're super used to one specific stylus, whether that's the functionality on the Apple Pencil, if you're a digital artist, you might be used to that form factor, shape, and overall feedback that you get from the Apple Pencil. It might be weird at first using a different digital stylus, but I think it's something that pretty much anyone can get used to over time. I personally don't do any digital art or take many physical notes using a digital stylus, but I can definitely see the benefits of using the stylus since all these tablets have excellent magnetically attaching stylus, whether that's on the keyboard, on the side, or back of the device. And if you're using these tablets on a daily basis and it's your main computing device, it's a great way to not only input text, but you can also control the entire tablet with the stylus itself. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the cameras. Now, all three of these tablets have a rear-facing array of cameras and a front camera. On the rear side, you're looking at 12 megapixel stills on the iPad with 4K 60 FPS video capturing capabilities. The Samsung actually has two rear-facing camera. One is a 13 megapixel wide and an 8 megapixel ultra wide with 4K video capturing capabilities. And the Surface Pro camera has a single 10 megapixel camera that record also 4K resolution. In terms of which camera is the best, I would say they're pretty utilitarian for the most part, but in terms of low light performance and video quality, I think the iPad has an edge up over here. But most people are going to be using the front-facing cameras for video calls and things like that. And on the iPad, you have a single camera. It is an ultra wide that pans and scans to make sure that you're in the frame, and it'll track you with that single camera. The Samsung uses a different approach. It has two cameras. One is a 12 megapixel wide and a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and it kind of blends the two cameras together to do a pan and scan for the similar functionality. And on the Surface Pro camera, you're looking at a quad HD frontwards facing camera, which is also ultra wide, and it uses pretty much the same technique on the iPad where it'll pan and scan using that single camera in your video calls to make sure that you're in frame. Take a look at our side-by-side comparison. Now, what you're looking at is the front-facing camera on the Microsoft Surface. It has auto scanning capabilities for pan and scan, so you can move yourself around the frame and it should track you much like the other tablets that we have over here. But you can also turn that feature off, and this is actually what the field of view on the original camera looks like. Now, what you're looking at is the front-facing camera on the iPad Pro, and it actually is zoomed in to the actual image sensor, which actually looks like this. So it's ultra wide, and it basically zooms and crops in and tracks your face when you're in a video call or using FaceTime. But this is the overall quality of the front-facing camera. Now, this is the front-facing camera on the Samsung Galaxy Tab S10 Ultra. It actually has two cameras. One is a medium focal range, which is what we're using right now, but you also have a dedicated camera for a wide-angle field of view for multiple people, and this doesn't zoom in or crop in as much since there are those two cameras, but is the video quality and the audio quality better than the iPad Pro? Now, moving forward, let's talk about the processors on each of these tablets. Now, on the iPad side, we're obviously using the M4 Silicon, which is either available in a 9-core CPU or a 10-core CPU, depending upon your configuration. Since we have the baseline configuration, we're looking at 9-core CPU with 3 performance cores and 6 high-efficiency cores. You also get a 10-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, and we have 256 gigabytes of long-term storage with 8 gigabytes of RAM on this iPad Pro. The Samsung Tab S10 Ultra is utilizing a Dimensity 9300 Plus SoC from MediaTek, which is an octa-core CPU, has a built-in GPU. We have 256 gigabytes of long-term storage with the option to add more since we have the SD expansion card slot, and 12 gigabytes of RAM. The Surface Pro is utilizing a Qualcomm Snapdragon X Plus processor, either available in the 10-core version, which we have over here with the LCD version, or the 12-core version with the OLED panel. And we have an embedded Adreno GPU, and in terms of the storage configuration, we have the 256 gigabyte M.2 drive in here, but you can obviously upgrade to a 1 terabyte and 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, in order to do a semi-apples to apples comparison, we're going to take a look at some of our benchmark results using a Geekbench cross-platform AI benchmarking suite, which is going to measure the precision or reliability levels of the machine learning capabilities of each processor in a scenario where you have a large data set, 32-bit or single-point precision, a medium data set or 16-bit half precision, a low data set or 8-bit, otherwise known as quantized precision. We're going to get 3 scores on each precision levels to see how accurate and reliable the machine learning is. And generally speaking, the higher the score, the better it is for the machine learning capabilities. So on the Apple M4 chip, we're getting the highest score in all 3 categories. It's actually very good in single and half precision large data sets, and compared to the other 2, which struggle a little bit, especially on the Qualcomm side. But when it comes to quantized data, so dealing with small amount of information, it actually is quite similar to what we're getting with the Snapdragon X Plus chip on the Microsoft side, of getting just around the 5,000 point mark, versus the MediaTek is quite a lot bit lower than the other 2. I'm not too sure how this is going to be actually applicable in terms of real world AI processing capabilities, since so many different AI systems run on different machine learning algorithms, and each architecture is different across the platforms. But generally speaking, obviously the processing capabilities of the M4 is going to be quite a lot more superior than the other 2, which we're going to take a look at in our more conventional benchmark results. So if you take a look at traditional Geekbench, both in terms of single core and multi-core, we're getting a pretty massive difference compared to the other 2 tablets. We're getting right around 3,600 points on the single core and over 12,000 points on the multi-core, versus on the Samsung, you're getting a score that's almost half that on both single and multi-core performance. Now, the Qualcomm chip, even though single core performance-wise it's at least half the performance as the M4, but multi-core-wise it's quite comparable. We're getting just under 12,000 points on the Snapdragon X Plus. And if we take a look at Antutu benchmark, we're getting a total score of about 2.2 million versus 2.6 million on the M4, and the Samsung with the MediaTek processor is just getting over 2 million points. Now, from a graphics standpoint, we're going to run the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme. This will give us an average FPS score, and on the Surface Pro 11th generation, we're getting 37 average frames per second versus we're getting 48.7 average frames per second on the M4 and 30 frames per second on this Samsung. So in terms of the overall graphical capabilities, the M4 does have a pretty significant edge up from the other 2. And typically speaking, you're going to find that the M4 is the fastest one, the Microsoft is second fastest, and the Samsung is last in terms of its processing capabilities. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the multitasking capabilities of each of these tablets. Since they're Ultra tablets, they come with a hefty price tag. They're designed to potentially replace your laptop/desktop PC. So let's see how each of these fare. Now, we'll start with the Samsung. It's using the Android platform, which obviously has been pretty flexible since it's based on Linux. And one thing that's really cool about Samsung is they have the Dex interface, which can wirelessly connect to any display that's connected to a wireless network. You can obviously hook it up wired through an external monitor. And with Samsung Dex, it pretty much makes Android into a Windows/Linux based interface similar to a desktop. So you have floating windows, you have multitasking capabilities, you can minimize and extend, do split screen, organize different desktop interfaces, and so much more. And potentially you could definitely use this as a laptop/desktop replacement setup. The only limiting factor is that the Android app library, I think for the past couple of years has been a little bit stagnant, certainly in terms of pro app support. iPad OS has been really pushing the envelope in terms of what you can do on an iPad, and since they have big third-party developers like Adobe making exclusive applications that rivals their desktop variants, you can definitely do quite a lot more video editing, photo editing with the Pro App library selection on iPad OS than Android. There are still great, powerful apps on the Android platform, but not so much when you're comparing it to certainly Windows 11 and even iPad OS. And speaking of iPad OS, for the past couple of years since the introduction of things like Center Stage, split view multitasking, as well as the ability to hook up a Bluetooth keyboard and mice and wired and wireless displays, you can certainly use this as a laptop/desktop replacement device. And since you have the power of the M4 chip, it's just as fast as a desktop or laptop that you're going to get from Apple. And even though iPad OS has developed quite a lot and is more than capable of doing most of people's day-to-day tasks, but if you're a real power user that relies on desktop grade software, it's still not there yet. It's still 25% of a real operating system. I'm really waiting for the day that Mac OS X and iPad OS merge together to create one operating system to rule them all. And speaking of an operating system to rule them all, let's talk about the Microsoft Surface Pro 11th generation running the full Windows 11 operating system. And this is probably the biggest advantage and the reason that I would probably pick the Surface Pro over the other two. Because of the fact that it's running the full Windows operating system, it's a full-on PC, full stop. You can hook it up to an external monitor, use any kind of PC peripheral, whether it be keyboard and mice, play most of the Steam games on the library, since Qualcomm and ARM processors have really come quite a long way in terms of gaming compatibility. And actually, most games actually run pretty decent, especially at lower resolutions. And just the fact that this is a full-on laptop/desktop operating system makes it pretty much have no inherent weaknesses from a software side. Now, moving on, let's talk about AI. Now, pretty much all these big companies are utilizing AI in a very similar way. They're obviously running off of the platform of large language models, which really started this current generation of AI, with the ability to summarize and rewrite your text inputs, whether that's in a specific manner for email or notes or any kind of document you're writing, or to summarize existing text that you're viewing on display, whether they be on a website, article you're reading, in addition to other variations of that task. So all of them can pretty much rewrite your text in a specific way, as well as compose entirely new topics of text messages based on your prompts that you put in to the language models. Now, there's really infinite ways where AI can enhance your day-to-day computing needs, but let's talk about each tablet specifically. Now, on the Samsung side, obviously we're using the smarter version of Bixby, which has a more human-like voice, can also answer a little bit more complex questions, but hasn't really made a tremendous amount of leap forward in terms of data knowledge. It still refers you back to the internet and can only answer a certain set of questions for your personal data. Unlike the Apple side, where Siri has access to most of your personal data, and if you're comfortable with Apple using that data, and supposedly they have pretty good privacy where you can have third-party people actually check their privacy and make sure that they're not actually selling it to other third parties. But if you trust Apple and give them all that information, they can actually do quite a lot with it. And that's what Siri can do. It can prioritize your personal notifications, so the things that mean the most to you, whether that's work, personal, messages will actually arrive before other things, or prioritize your personal life. You can also communicate with Siri much like a regular human, since it listens to you for a longer period of time when you actually prompt it. And unlike Bixby, which stops listening to you after a couple of seconds, you can actually have a contextual conversation with it and include personal details about specific dates, specific people. And since that has access to most of your native applications and Apple is controlling hardware and software, it has a larger data set to pull from, knows more information about you, and therefore be more useful as a virtual personal assistant, much greater than even Microsoft Copilot, which is quite similar in terms of core functionality that you get from Apple and Samsung. So you can ask it general questions, schedule a specific meeting, take a specific note down, and has no problems with that. But there are some unique things that Copilot will do that I haven't encountered in the native AI suite on both Apple and Samsung side. One of the things that I really love is the ability to summarize videos in the Edge browser. So you can go to YouTube and ask it to summarize the video. It will give you key points and highlights of that video. And you can even ask it specific questions. And if it doesn't find it in the video, it will actually search the web for it. And you can verify that information, whether that's correct or not, which is a pretty cool feature, quite unique to the Microsoft platform. But the big enhancement from an AI standpoint definitely has to be through the Microsoft 365 integration. So that's through Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And you can do a number of things. Obviously with Word, in conjunction with Copilot, you can proofread your errors and things like that of existing text that you physically wrote, or you can rewrite an entire new Word document with a single prompt or a couple of key factors. The other cool thing is you can actually take a text message or a Word document and transform that into a PowerPoint presentation. And if you do that, you'll see that your slideshow is contextual based on the specific order of information found in your Word document. It will also generate images for that slideshow, and you can obviously rearrange or regenerate specific slides. In Excel, it can give you specific formulas for different functions or even predict formulas and function based on your existing data set. For video calls and Microsoft Teams, it will transcribe the video call, summarize different call to actions to organize that call a little bit more efficiently. If you use Outlook, you can use it to summarize or rewrite your existing emails. You can prioritize or deprioritize different senders and receivers. And there's just an infinite amount of ways that you can use Microsoft Copilot to make your work-life balance a little bit more efficient. Now, lastly, let's talk about the battery life. Now, in terms of battery capacity, the iPad M4 is using a 38.9 watt-hour battery. It has a battery life rating of about 10 hours of video playback, according to Apple. On the Samsung side, you're looking at a 43.4 watt-hour battery, and Samsung claims up to 16 hours of video playback. And on the Microsoft Surface Pro 11, you're looking at a 48 watt-hour battery for the LCD version. The OLED has a 53 watt-hour battery, but we have obviously the LCD version, and Microsoft claims up to 14 hours of video playback. So we actually did our own video playback test where we simply play a video on loop in airplane mode, 50% brightness, and see how long it takes from 100 to 0%. Pretty much where we can't play a video. The total runtime on the iPad Pro 13-inch version was 14 hours 37 minutes. On the Samsung S10 Ultra, you're looking at 12 hours and 52 minutes. And on the Microsoft Surface Pro 11, we got a score of about 16 hours and 18 minutes. Now, in terms of day-to-day use, I'm not going to say that the Surface Pro is going to be more or less efficient than the iPad or the Samsung, but generally speaking, in terms of video playback, it is the best in terms of battery life. Now, in summary, if you were to ask me which tablet is the best in terms of overall feature sets and value, I'd probably go with the Microsoft Surface Pro 11th generation. Not only does it have an excellent battery life, but great ports and connectivity options with 2 USB 4, a separate power connector, as well as user expandable M.2 drive. On top of that, it's running the full Windows 11 operating system, so software-wise, there's no limitations. It's the cheapest with the LCD variant, and with the Qualcomm chip, it's fast enough for pretty much most people's needs. I'd put the iPad Pro with the M4 chip in second place. It is definitely the most impressive from a hardware standpoint, with the fastest processor, great for AI as well as general content creation, whether it be video or photo editing. And it's an excellent overall device with a lot of capabilities, and iPad OS is maturing quite nicely. On top of that, it probably has the best display that you're going to find on any consumer electronic device. Now, lastly, with the Samsung Galaxy Tab S10 Ultra, it is definitely the best for consuming content. Great for watching videos with the widescreen display and thinner overall bezels, and plus with the larger display, it is pretty nice to consume content. And from a general use perspective, hardware and software wise, it's pretty capable enough to fit most people's needs. But when you start comparing it to the power of the M4 chip and the software capabilities of full operating system on the Microsoft side, it is fairly limited. And given that it's around the same price point, it's hard to recommend over the other two. But really on that, guys, that's really it. I definitely have to know what you guys think is the best ultra tablet that's out there right now. Do you think there's anything better than the Surface Pro 11th generation? Definitely love to know what you guys think. Check out the description down below for more details about everything we've talked about. And if you haven't done so, please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you real soon in the next one. Take care.